Hi, everybody. You're listening to the Soberful Podcast. And today I'm joined by Karen McMahon. Okay, I can't say it. You're going to have to say it.
It's just like MAN, McMahon.
Welcome, Karen. So, Karen is so interesting, divorce and high conflict coach and strategist, so I was on Karen's podcast a while ago because obviously alcohol can play a big role in relationships and relationships breaking down. So I was talking about that and I was like, oh, Karen, your work is going to be so relevant to my audience, people going through very difficult divorces. So I thought we've got to get you on to talk about this. How did you get into this?
I think the way we all get into our calling. So I married late. I thought I found my Prince Charming, and 7 years into the relationship with 2 little children, it was crazy, and I was very confused. And then I took a couple of years trying to mend, and then once I decided to divorce, it was a 3.5 year high conflict court-based divorce with 2 very young children who were very confused. And so when I emerged, my career at the time was selling commercial printing, which was in and of itself a dying industry. And then I just thought, well, this is so pathetic. Like, there has to be something more important after this huge transformation I've gone through, something more important for me to do in the world than sell ink on paper. And I began searching. And once I found life coaching, I knew what my niche was. I knew that this was my place to touch and help heal the world.
Wow, I can see that this is needed. Is it 50% of marriages end up in divorce?
Well, an interesting fact is it's approximately 50% of first marriages. What's really interesting is it's 67% of second marriages, and as if you would think we would learn, it's 73% of third marriages end in divorce.
That's really interesting because I'm in hopefully my first and only marriage, but this is my husband's second marriage.
And what people do, and this is kind of a great preface to our conversation, is in the beginning, I think we all think we're divorcing the problem. And
yes,
when people don't do the work that you invite them into and I invite them into, they don't change. They feel they've left the problem behind.
Yes.
And then the question, and we've heard this question, why does this keep happening to me? And when something happens to us, we have no agency. We're just the victim of it. And that's just not true. So in my opinion, all of our challenges in life will keep happening until we learn our lesson, and then they just miraculously disappear. And it's the same thing with divorce. If you divorce well and you grow through it, and then you find another person, you're so much more likely for that to be your forever person.
So interesting. So let's start here. Divorce can be really horrible. I mean, it's never, I've actually seen a couple of people divorce in the most healthiest way possible. And they were both therapists, like so healthy and spent Christmases together, that kind of stuff. And I've seen the opposite.
Yeah. So even, and I have had the privilege of supporting people through amicable divorces, not very many because it's not my niche, but even those divorces, I mean, the bottom line is it's such a hard decision to make. If there are children involved, there's a lot of guilt and shame, and am I harming them? And then there's the unweaving, right? So it's like if you've been with someone 7, 14, 24, I've got some people 40 years, that's a lot of unweaving to do. So the emotional toll is always difficult. And for those who find their way to, let's put the children in the center, let's honor the human beings we fell in love with, let's accept each other for our shortcomings, and let's just co-parent and have a different type of family, that is gorgeous and beautiful. That often does not happen in my community. And it certainly didn't happen in my life.
Yeah. It takes someone who's really worked on themselves to be in that place, because there's so many layers, right? There's the financial aspect, there's the practical aspect, there's the childcare aspect for a lot of people, and then there's the emotional aspect. Can we start there about the emotions and the process? And you sort of said about so I'll ask this question. I think that I know I did. I never got married to them, but I did get engaged. I went in with a lot of naivety in this projecting that romantic love was going to save me.
100%. And I think that, we meet someone, we go through limerence where it's like, oh my God, my feet aren't touching the ground and they're so amazing and they have no shortcomings. And then we settle into, oh my God, they're a human being and they have fault. And, there's an amazing book called Getting the Love You Want. It's written by Gay Hendricks and Helen Hunt. They're
Oh, I know Gay Hendricks. Yeah, I love his book on Upper Limits. Yeah, he's great.
Actually, I apologize. This is Harville Hendricks. Gay Hendricks is another favorite.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
Harville and Helen are in their 70s. They've been married and they started Imago therapy and they wrote Getting the Love You Want. And in that book, he explains how we magnetically attract to the wounds of our parents. And so he says one of the reasons people think they've met their soulmate, and this is all unconscious, so people shake their head and it's like, we don't go, oh, you're a son of a gun, angry man, just like my dad, let me fall. That's not what we do. But that's what's going on underneath on an unconscious level. And so once limerence is over, we're actually really triggered by their shortcomings because we were attracted to what was familiar, even though we didn't know it. And that's when things can really break down. And in a healthy relationship, I could say to you, I see your younger self. I see where you want to grow and I love you and I'm going to support you, and vice versa. When everyone's healthy and when everyone can keep their side of the street clean and not judge and blame the other side. But when dysfunction enters, which we've all been raised with some dysfunction, that's when things can really go off the rails.
You must have, I mean, I don't know if you can talk about what you've seen. Like, can you give us some scenarios?
Of what I've seen.
Yeah, what you've worked with.
Well, so one of the things, and your listeners may resonate with this, especially if they have a partner who has some kind of addiction or alcoholism. And so the first thing is we live in denial, right? So I was married to someone who I'd call him a waker and baker, right? He just smoked pot all day long. I was so adamant that I wasn't going to marry an alcoholic like my dad. And I truly believed that I nailed it. Until I realized it's the exact same thing. And so we don't know until we know. And in those early stages of trying to figure it out, it's very confusing. And especially if you have a partner who blame shifts, can't take responsibility. And if you've been a little bit of a people pleaser or caretaker or codependent, you just take all of that on. And so rather than gaining clarity, people who come to me in the early stages are very confused. One of the things I hear the most is, I've made the decision, but I absolutely want an amicable divorce. Great. On a scale of 1 to 10, how amicable was your marriage? Oh, it was a 1. Okay. So help me to understand how this is going to happen. Now you're going into negotiating the biggest and most tender topics for the rest of your life. So how would that be amicable? And the thing is, I thought I'd have an amicable divorce because that was my heart, as if he didn't play a role. And so in many of my cases, not that my clients don't have their own sloppy shortcomings, they absolutely do. But it doesn't matter if they want an amicable divorce. If you're divorcing someone who's inflexible, who can't take responsibility, who tends to blame shift or accuse, or who's lacking empathy, or who's just not ready to face their own demons and shortcomings, that is not going to be a smooth and amicable divorce. That's going to be problematic.
So how do you help someone navigate that then?
Well, the step 1 is evicting them from your head. Right. So often I'll get on the phone with someone and I'll say, so Veronica, how do you feel about shared custody? And the answer will be, well, my husband said. I'm sorry, is he in the room? Are we coaching with him? And so what we realize very quickly is, you're actually thinking about I work with men and women, or her perspective, right? You're thinking about your partner's perspective before you're even rooted into your own. You're actually making decisions based on their beliefs or You have fears based on their beliefs, their values, their priorities, because they're squatting between your ears. You've given up the agency of your perspective. And this happens very slowly. It's chipped away at, chipped away at. You're so foolish. You're so stupid. Why are you so sensitive? Why can't you this? Like all of those things that are said to people in these dysfunctional relationships, dysfunctional, toxic, abusive, whatever, wherever you are on the spectrum. And so over the course of years or decades, we literally lose ourselves. I was a complete shell of myself. When I went to see my therapist for the second time, I left and tried marriage counseling. And when I went back, she said, Karen, you're a shell of the woman I met a couple of years ago. And I thought, wow, I was a shell a couple of years ago when I came to see you. So I'm just like, I was so lost, so lost. One day we were at a therapy session for my kids, and they were barely in grade school. They're fighting and yelling in the waiting room. And the therapist said, would you like to go out and discipline them? And with the most shame that I ever had, I was like, would you do it? They're not going to listen to me. I don't have anything. And it was just, I was just so broken. And that's often where we are when we start, like some version of that, because you've been just putting up with for a long time and slowly but surely believing things that aren't true.
How do you help them evict someone from their head? I actually have a process that I teach to do this, and
Oh,
I'm
okay.
curious what you do.
Yeah, so I have a program, Reclaim Your Mind. And so what we do is we look at the distortions, we look at the things that are said. And so there's their critic towards you, and then your inner critic jumping in. And so we look at that and we look at how true is that. And there are a number of different distortions that, from the blame shifting to the you're bad, to your own insecurities. And so we kind of look at everything that's going on. There are seven different distortions. And some of those are actually the things that keep people in the marriage. Like, you'll destroy the children if you leave. Like, so there are all these things. So we look at each of those and we unweave them. And once you've kind of begun to see the difference between your thoughts and their thoughts, what swoops right in immediately is your inner critic, because that was part of the magnet that attached you. So it's like, first we need to evict them, and then we need to get crystal clear on, your sage, your spirit, your positive versus the inner critic. And again, it's a matter of muting one and amplifying the other. And there's baby steps that we take people through so that they start standing on solid ground and noticing in the moment, oh, wait a second, that's actually not my belief. And they really begin to pivot, and you see the confidence begin to come back.
And then what? What happens after that?
Well, so for my audience, once you begin to be grounded in your mind again, the very next thing you need is protection. And so the most important skill is boundaries. And people in dysfunctional relationships, I was boundary oblivious, my spouse was boundary oblivious, and so there's no boundaries. And so when you don't understand boundaries, it's very easy to get locked into a victim position, because you think, I told him to stop speaking mean to me.
Yeah.
And he's not paying attention. So I said it louder, and I said it more often, and I stamped my feet, and I cried, and I yelled, and I screamed. So there's nothing else I can do.
Yes.
And so the whole power, which we know is in taking the agency of upholding the boundary, when someone doesn't have that, they just feel like this ongoing doormat. So now that you've reclaimed your mind, you're starting to think your thoughts, you're really double checking on everything, you're going to start getting bold. You're going to start stating what you want. And that's going to be really dangerous if you don't know boundaries. And so the next thing is, how do you create boundaries? Digital boundaries with emails and texting. I teach people about a firm yes, and the importance of yes and no, and why a firm no is so important, and why when you say yes to somebody else, you're saying no to yourself, and just slowing that whole thing down to understand, what are my internal boundaries? So when it comes to boundaries, I don't know if you hear this all the time, but my clients will always say, he made me feel. And it's like, well, can somebody else make you feel? And I take them through a whole scenario, 3 different people from 3 different backgrounds. They feel something totally different with the same person talking at them, and understanding when you can own that I feel this way because of everything that happened in my past that taught me what was safe and what wasn't safe, who I am and who I'm not. Like, that inner boundary is a game changer, and that makes the outer boundary so much easier.
Could not be more in step with that, Karen. Boundaries will change your life. And so I'm what's jumped into my mind is one of the things I teach is about the communicating from parent, adult, child. And in this process, I think people are stuck in child, right? It's
Yes.
one child screaming at the other child to meet their needs or whatever. Like, what do you teach about communication? So you've established boundaries, you've got them out of their head.
Yeah, and I, while inner child work is considered therapeutic work, I've done so much inner child work. I invite all of my clients into that because I think that it allows us to have a soft and loving heart toward ourselves, and to actually see, no matter how displeasing the person on the other side of the table is, to be able to see that piece of them just allows for grace and mercy and dignity in this whole process. We have a number of different things with communication. I mean, I would say the first one is I teach people how to keep it in the eye. Like, you've spent years going, you. And so learning how to speak from your experience and your desire and your boundary and what you want is one of them. Another one is, again, I have my audience of people, they are traumatized, they are hurt, they are broken. Many of them are conflict averse or avoidant. And so they become passive aggressive. And so they think they're really good communicators, but they're never saying the thing. And so, we teach them little things like BIF is an acronym that almost anyone in the high conflict world knows. It's Bill Eddy is like the king of high conflict. It stands for brief, informative, firm, and friendly, because we all want to say, especially if we're women, we want to say 3 pages worth of stuff. And it's like, I heard you, that's not going to work. This is another option. I hope you have a nice day. Like, brief, informative, firm, and friendly. So
Love
that is
Love that.
brilliant strategy. And then the other one is the sandwich or hamburger approach.
Yeah.
To bring in that graciousness is, if you don't start with something that they can receive, then their dukes are up or the ears are shut down, and you might as well talk to a wall. And I just did a podcast yesterday on how to tell your spouse that you've made the decision. And that too, it's like, you don't want to say, well, you've been so bad for all of these. Like, you never want to start that way. You want to have, and the sandwich approach is something soft on the front end and the back end. And then the message is the meat in the middle. And so an example would be, we've brought beautiful children into the world, and we've been trying to work on this marriage for a while, and it's not working, and I've made a decision to leave. And I really believe that we can be awesome co-parents and do a great job, and hopefully, have an amicable divorce. And that's what I desire. Boom, you've told the whole story. It was sandwiched, and you're good. And so no matter what it is you want to say, if you can say it in that sandwich, you're not controlling. It might not work, but the possibility of your message being received is much higher.
This is all fabulous. We're very in line with how we work. Tell me, what is high conflict? How does
That's such a great question. I think that most people, I've been playing around with names for so long, because I'll have people say, I'm not high conflict. And I was like, you know what? I would have said I'm not high conflict because it's so normal. The problem, and that's the problem I'm having, like I say, complex divorce, difficult divorce, it's a high conflict divorce. It doesn't mean you want to be high conflict. And so what does that mean? The situation becomes high conflict when the ability to reconcile anything, problem solve, goes nowhere. So you've been spending years or decades sweeping your problems under the rug, and there's just a big mountain in the middle of the living room. When you share your feelings or your concerns, you're met with a lack of empathy, or the other thing is deflection. Oh, oh, you're upset? Well, I'm twice as upset. And so you come to the table with a topic, and your topic is just never addressed because you're always one-upped. Again, a lot of blame and accusation. Another thing that's very confusing is revisionist history. How is it possible that you and I remember everything so differently from the past? And some differences make sense. We're humans. When it's just so, and black and white thinking. And so it's like you're right or you're wrong, you're good or you're bad. So it's, if you think about every way that creates inflexibility, how do you possibly have a relationship with someone who doesn't take responsibility for their part, who sees everything as black and white, who can't hear you, who can't see you, hasn't acknowledged you? So this is what I just had a client who finished up 36 years married. She's a millionaire. She didn't even know it. They lived in a nice house, but she had got a Target budget and got criticized and challenged every time she came back from the supermarket. And we spent about a couple of years getting her through the divorce, and she ended up with millions. And now she's just like, oh my God, like I actually can heal the world. I can go out and be the person I want to be, and I can have the impact I want to have. And like this almost 70 years old, blossoming individual and she totally owned her part. She was like, oh my God, he would put his hands over the tax return and have me sign it. And I did. Why? Why did I? And so there's this the liberation that people feel at the end of a high conflict divorce. This is the caveat: when you've done your personal work. If you don't do your personal work, you can hire the most expensive attorney, you can have the best locked in settlement, and you will be in the exact same relationship with that human being, living under two separate roofs, angry at everything they do with the kids, thinking about what they're doing, who they're seeing, why they're wrong, and nothing changes. And so for me, while I can help people through all the practical, legal, logistical parts of divorce, I'm great at that. I love doing that. It's not worth anything if you're not going to look at your mindset, look at your history, work on your emotional triggers, learn how to be a better communicator, learn how to support your children powerfully, which you can't do if they have a difficult parent until you have done all of that work first. I encourage my clients to roll your sleeves up, do the work. It's only for the courageous. It requires brave, it requires courageous, and the fruits are just simply priceless. You get to live in peace and joy regardless of the circumstances or human beings in your life.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Gosh, I had so many questions that were going through my mind there. Because when there is children involved, no matter what the age of the kids, you are going to be in relationship with that person for the rest of your life.
Not necessarily.
To some degree, but really?
100%. And so, yes, the truth is your children are going to be in relationship with that person for the rest of their life. And that's a maybe, right? So all of these things, and I say this because when I say I do uber high conflict, I'll talk to matrimonial attorneys, and I'm like, what you get 4 times a year, I get 4 times a week. Like, so my personal experience, divorced 18 years. My children are 26 and 28. My ex-husband almost died like 8 years ago, and I became his healthcare proxy, and I got his family to come and visit him and everything. And it just continued to get so bad that my son thought of taking his life. And so there comes a time where when somebody, and I have an incredible amount of grace for him, but when somebody is so broken that they are crushing your kids, you don't bash them, you don't put them down, you create boundaries.
Yeah.
And then you help your children figure out. I talked to my daughter's therapist, and I said, what do you say to people who are truly dealing with somebody on and higher up on the narcissistic spectrum? And he said, you find a lane. If you want to have a relationship, find a safe lane and stay in it and let the rest go. And my son found a lane, and my daughter closed the door and is very much at peace with it. And so I have clients who really struggle because their children are very engaged with the other parent, and maybe in a really unhealthy way. If I didn't do my work, if you don't do your work, you cannot support your children through whatever decisions they make. And so there will be marriages and there will be children and there will be grandchildren. And the best we can do as the person who divorced somebody on some spectrum is to be as centered and healthy as we can be. And then everyone else, like Mel Robbins says, let them. Everybody else does their thing. And you are a stand for health. And the other thing is, if you want your children to come to you and talk to you when they're struggling with anything, and especially the other parent, you have to not speak badly of the other parent. You need to be so gracious so that they trust you. And when you build that trust, you get to be their person. And that's a pretty cool thing.
There's nothing more damaging to kids than being weaponized in the middle of a divorce. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible thing for children to experience. I guess I was thinking of my own circumstances, which you deal with high conflict, so that makes sense. My husband's first kids are like 40 and 37. So there's been weddings and there's been christenings and there's been grandchildren and all that kind of stuff. And it's very amicable. It's very lovely. My husband's first wife is very nice, and her husband is very nice, and we can all get together. We only get together if there's a family thing, and I don't know when that will happen again now because they're married and all that kind of stuff. But it's very, very nice, and I think my husband called her when they had the first grandchild. It was just very lovely.
100%. One of the women on my team, I've got a team of divorce coaches. She had a very amicable divorce. Her ex-husband is good friends with her.
Yeah.
Now lover, and they all celebrate holidays together.
Yeah.
And it's really just beautiful. I have clients who have been able to go on vacation. It's just
amazing.
Much more few and far between.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's like,
Yeah.
I think it's so important to know that if you can't do that, you don't want to feel doubly victimized. And so if you can't have an amicable co-parenting, you parallel parent and you be amicable.
Yeah.
You never have to feel bad about yourself because the other person's not capable.
Yeah.
There are a lot of flavors and shapes and sizes, and we can find one that fits.
You be the grown-up. Yeah. So I have several questions. How often is alcohol involved, do you think, in the relationship breakups that you see or work with?
I would say
that
between, if we put alcoholism, use of pharmaceutical or street drugs or pornography or anything, infidelity is actually much higher than I had anticipated. So maybe we pull that out. I would say probably 25% of the time, but that's a guess.
And so is it sometimes, I've had clients where it's their partner but it's both of them.
100%.
But one's got sober and the other one isn't, and that it's just got, and what happens is it's not that one's sober and one isn't sober. It's what you say. It's one of them is now growing and one of them isn't.
That's exactly what it is. And that happens. I have clients who have never drank a drop of anything, who married into alcoholism and kind of spent a lot of years trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And then it's like, her whole family tree is dripping with alcohol. How did I not see that? So you have that. You have the two who are both kind of going into recovery, and one grows and one doesn't, and every other variation. Yeah.
So talk to me about infidelity, because I have worked with sex addiction in the past. You said that's very common.
Yeah, I mean, for all the problems I had in my marriage, my ex was a fully monogamous man, and so you only know what you know.
Well, if you're stoned all the time, it's actually a bit hard to be with people. That's the thing. There's not a whole lot of motivation going on.
There is that too. That's very funny. But when I started my practice in 2010, and I just, it was like, I mean, if I were to guess off the top of my head, I would say like 30, 35, 40%. It was very high. Yeah. And I've experienced people who, I actually had one young woman, she just married a severe sex addict and was thrown on her ear, but she got out within the first year or two of the marriage. She was just like, I don't know what this is. But I have people that I refer to when that's the bigger thing. One of the interesting things about infidelity is it's such a tender topic to talk about, how in most cases, like sex addiction and pornography aside, the marriage was broken. And then one partner chose a really uncourageous, unethical way of addressing it. So rather than going toe to toe and saying there's a problem here, they went and they got their needs met someplace else. And the problem when you're going through a divorce is the wronged person. It's so hard for them to hear that because they hear it as like the excuse, and it's never an excuse. But the truth is, if you think that you're getting divorced because of the infidelity and you can't look at the broken relationship that led to that, then the chances of rinsing and repeating that just go through the roof.
Yeah, 100%. That's what I've seen, is that sometimes it's people can't exit a relationship, and they being unfaithful and being caught forces the other person to do it, right? It just forces the issue.
And then they're twice as mad. It's like, I have to be the bad guy. I have to leave, and you're the one who blew everything up. And back to the things were probably a little bit blown up before that too.
So recovering from that is about, I mean, is there truth in people who are happily married don't seek to be unfaithful, right? If you are happily married and fulfilled, unless you're a sex addict, which is different.
Yeah, if we put addiction aside, if you're in a healthy marriage and you've got good communication, it's highly unlikely. It's highly unlikely. And, you know, there's a lot of reality around midlife crisis. And so you could be happily married and then your spouse loses their job. They can't find another one. They don't feel good about themselves. So do they then dive into going into therapy, getting some coaching and doing their work? Or do they go and find somebody's bed to sleep in or a race car to buy? And so that's a real piece of it too. And I've had clients where it's like, I just never expected that. I actually have a client very recently, and after 30 some odd years, job loss and self-esteem loss. And all of a sudden there's a younger woman and, you know, the whole marriage has fallen apart. But when we dug deeper, this individual said, I knew he had never done the emotional work and I was just strong enough for both of us. And what is that saying? If you pick someone up and carry them for as long and as far as you carry them, you're stealing all of that time and distance from them, because when you put them down, they're going to be in the same footprints of when you pick them up. And how many of us have carried spouses through years, and it's like, we're not doing anyone a service if we don't let them face their own demons, learn their own lessons. And you know, it sounds so far astray from divorce, but it's actually very central to why you are where you are.
Don't steal growth opportunities from people.
I love that.
That's what I talk when I frame boundaries about saying no, or that you can't. If you say yes when you don't mean it, you could be stealing a growth opportunity from that person who needs to have a dilemma or a struggle because you didn't fix it or save them or do the thing. They maybe need to have that because there's such growth in there.
Right. And I think that brings us to the topic of codependence, which I love talking about. I think that the confusion I've heard so often is, you know, I am a service-oriented person. I am a caregiver, and now I'm ashamed of being that. And it's so important for us to understand that caretaking, caregiving is a beautiful thing. To have a service-oriented heart and to show love and compassion through service to the people in our lives is gorgeous. And so what's the difference then between how do I know when I'm doing that and it's codependent and when I'm doing that and it's gorgeous? How do I know the difference? And it comes to what I'm going to refer to as the level of your emotional energy. And so I'll give you two examples. If I'm in low energy, let's say victim or conflict energy, which are our two lowest levels of energy, and I'm being asked to go and spend a weekend at my in-laws when, you know, they drink and they this and they that. And I say, well, I love my husband. Of course, sweetheart, I'll go. Let's go. And I'm all in. But I'm doing it because I don't want him to be mad at me. I don't want them to be angry at me. I am afraid of, right? So I'm doing it from this place of either afraid of or resisting. Now, let's say you had plans with your girlfriends for the weekend, but your young adult is moving into their apartment for the first time and they're like, oh my God, would you come and help and decorate? It's like, I'm dumping my girls and I'm going and I'm hanging out. And that is coming from the super healthy, like level 4 compassion, service. I love you, honey. Not because if I don't come, you're going to be mad at me or
Yes.
anything. I'm not grasping for anything in what I'm doing. I am giving out of the kindness of my heart. And
Big, clear difference there.
yeah, and so that lower level means that I'm either grasping or I'm trying to avoid something and or I'm needing somebody's love or acknowledgement, whereas the higher level one is I'm all in because I love you and that's my heart. And it's a totally different energy. You could actually do the exact same thing from either a level 1 and 2 conflict victim energy or that higher level. It will present in everything you do, what level of energy you're coming from.
Yeah, and that's very common in my work is the entanglement, the codependency. I mean, that was me. I was a chronic people pleaser.
Yep.
If you liked me, I liked me. You know, I didn't know if I liked blue or green. Do you like blue? Because then I like blue, right? Just and so there's a lot of when you get sober, it's almost like I had no idea who I was. Like, actually, I like red. I think I might like red. I think I do. I'm not committing to it, but maybe I like red right now. And it's just this untangling from it's a process. This is the work, right? That's the work.
And I think that like one of the things I hear the most is, but isn't that selfish?
Oh,
Right? Like there's such a, it's
that's
so
a female thing. Men
skewed.
don't say that to each other.
It's so skewed. And it's like, that whole concept that me taking care of me, finding out what I like, doing what I like, that all of that would be selfish. And the truth is, when you've been selfless, so let's say in a marriage with your spouse and your kids for so long, and it's like you give yourself up, you're the doormat for years, and then you start becoming self-loving, everybody in your life is going to tell you that you're selfish because you've trained them to expect you to have zero needs, zero wants, and to always be a yes for them. And so actually stepping out of codependence into self-love, you have to, it's almost like you have to go through that fire of refinement and you have to retrain the people in your life, at least the healthy ones, to realize that no, today's for me. No, I'm doing that for me. My kid just asked for my car and he's like, I'm going away. I'm going snowboarding. And I was like, well, I'm taking the girls into the city. So you're going to have to use your old crappy car. And it's like, and yet if I wasn't using it, I could have easily said, yeah, no, of course, and so just having that ability to choose what's best for you and train the people in your life to know that, okay, cool, that's good.
We teach other people how they can treat us.
Yes, we do.
And then there's when we realize that, there's a process of retraining them and letting them know. And it takes a little while for people to get with it, but they will. Yeah. They will. They'll realize that the rules of the game have now changed.
I feel like, Veronica, the work that you do and the work that I do are very similar in that we help people break out of prisons of their own making and live a free and liberated life.
Yeah. That's it. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
What about when I have a couple more quick questions because I'm just fascinated. What about when there's a power imbalance?
There's always a power imbalance.
There's always a power imbalance.
In high conflict marriages, there's always a power imbalance. And that's one of the, going back to an earlier conversation. Hi, Karen. Can you help me? I want to have an amicable divorce and I'm going to mediate. And then I find out that there's been a complete power imbalance. You've been shut up, shut down, put down, what have you. And now you're going to go and sit with a neutral person across the table and you're going to negotiate all of these finances and the rest of your children's lives. You can't do that. You can't do that. You don't have the ability to do that. And so shifting that power imbalance happens throughout the course of the divorce. It happens by reclaiming your mind, by setting boundaries, by learning better communication, by taking all of those baby steps. And then on the practical level, you have to hire the right attorney. Many people will go out and they'll hire an attorney that is the twin of their high conflict spouse. And so now they're sandwiched between, because they're going to hire a bully to bully the bully. And now they have two bullies bullying them. And so it's horrible. Like, whatever you do, please, please, please do not hire a shark to bully your bully, because you will be bullied. And so understanding the different approaches to divorce, there's mediation, there's collaboration, there's litigation. If you have a severe power imbalance, I strongly encourage you to stay away from mediation. Collaboration is you have your attorney, he or she has their attorney, and the four of you sit around a table. But you have an attorney who's skilled they know your legal rights, they're skilled in negotiation, they're not going to back down from your bully. And so you're protecting yourself through the process. And then getting the kind of support that someone like I offer is going to be a game changer in being able to negotiate a good settlement.
Karen, this has been completely fascinating. It's very aligned with my work. You're absolutely, we do the same thing. We help people break out of prison, and we have the same methods and all of that kind of stuff. So I knew when I met you, I liked you. So now I like you even more. I know there's people who are going to want to reach out to you. I know you have a giveaway, or please tell people how they can find you and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I'm very excited. This is our 15th year in business, and we just redesigned our website. So if you go to journeybeyonddivorce.com, you can actually pick what stage of divorce you're in. And you'll have some free gifts. But for the general audience, I would say we have a fresh start guide, how to break free from a toxic spouse. And we talk a little bit about the reclaiming your mind. And you can get that right on the homepage, on the bottom of the homepage. I'll give you a direct link to it, Veronica.
Yeah.
And we also have a rapid relief call, which is my favorite thing to do. So if you're in a situation where this is resonating with you, and maybe you've been on the mender end fence for a long time, rapidreliefcall.com. It's a free coaching call. You'll get a flavor of how we work, and you'll definitely get some guidance and baby steps to get unstuck and begin to move in a direction of your desire. So I would love to support anyone who's interested in that.
Brilliant. Karen, I think we're going to probably have you back at some point, because I just think there was a lot more there we could have talked about.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of overlap. I'd love to see how we can collaborate together.
Same. Yeah. Thank you so much. I know people are going to I've got a lot of clients who are going through these kind of situations, and I just think you do an invaluable and really necessary service. I think that you're giving people these tools and strategies. It's utterly life-changing. It's completely life-changing, because otherwise, and Karen's completely right, you'll just marry the same person again, or you'll move in with the same person, or date the same person. It's all we can do is change ourselves. Everybody else is that's their side of the street. So Karen, thank you again. You've been a wonderful guest.
Thank you so much.
Please reach out to Karen if you if you feel like you could benefit from her services, and let me know what you think of the episode, and we will see you next week. Take care, everyone.
I dreamt that you were twisting through 7 suns of gold, and the gypsy was insisting that its story must be told.